Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Keep Right On podcast. We felt it was important to get live today and react to the news that Tony Mowbray has permanently stepped down from his position of Birmingham City manager. I'm Alex Dickin, as ever. I'm joined by Brian Dick. Brian, it's not really surprising news, is it? I think we've been kind of expecting this since the end of last season. Given the different statements that have been coming out from the club. Obviously, it was always hoped that Tony would come back for pre-season, but given that he's had a health scare, that his family is so far away up in the northeast in Middlesbrough way, it always felt unlikely that he'd come back.
Yeah, we've been very careful not to speculate, haven't we? Which we've tried as a pair and as an organisation, not to sort of drip feed stuff out there and maybe put the cart before the horse a little bit. But if now there is clarity, if we're looking at the whole piece, it does make a lot of sense on a human level, doesn't it? We'll come on to our feelings about the footballing side of things, but purely on a human level, absolutely. He made reference to his family in the club statement, which I think speaks volumes. And obviously, without trotting out aphorisms or whatever, family is everything, isn't it? And family is first, and health and everything. So yeah, that trumps everything. So yeah, it's not surprising news, and obviously it behoves us both now just for us to wish Tony well, a speedy recovery, and hopefully we'll see him back in the dugout at whatever level sometime very soon.
I remember back to his first press conference, the unveiling back in January. He actually spoke about how much of a wrench it was to leave his wife and his 3 kids again. Having had almost a perfect job at Sunderland, where he's only like 30 minutes down the road and could obviously live at home, because as a manager, when his family have been based in that part of the world, most of his jobs have actually been down here. So he's obviously spent a lot of his time in his managerial career, 20 years that spanned, away from his family. So yeah, like you said, Brian, I echo that. I think he's doing the right thing. It's important when you obviously have that. Obviously, having that health scare, that you put your family first, and it's good to see that he's doing that and putting his health first as well. Brian, we do want to reflect on Tony's time at Blues. It was only 8 games in the end, which is probably the saddest thing, because we saw in those 8 games a lot of really positive signs, didn't we?
Absolutely, and I've got to say, of all the things, the biggest disappointments in time sort of being around Blues during my journalistic career and what's happened to the club, this is the one that that there aren't many higher in terms of disappointment for me. Yeah, obviously you've got relegations and things like this, but I really did feel that Tony was the man to change the footballing culture at the club, in the first team squad, and around the wider club. He was very respected, had massive, huge amount of experience and knowledge, and it will always be a question of what might have been when the history book writers in a few years' time write about this chapter. It will be the unfinished business, won't it? It's, as I said, I had a lot of belief in what Tony could bring to the club. Even when Wayne Rooney was departed, I wrote a piece describing Mowbray as a sneaky good candidate, and we only ever really scratched the surface to that, and we did see signs that he could pull off something that I don't think I've seen in my time watching Blues, which would be to create a possession-based, attractive attacking team.
Yeah, some of the football in those games was actually really good, wasn't it? When you think back to that Leicester game, and I know I don't want to sit here and wax lyrical about a defeat, because Blues did lose 3-0, but the first half of that game, Blues coming 5-0 up. They played the best football I've seen of a Blues team.
Yeah, that first half was unbelievable. Jay Stansfield could have finished with a first half hat trick, couldn't he?
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one missing chances as well, but they absolutely cut Leicester to ribbons. The 2 home games at sort of towards the end of his tenure as well, they were really good. They didn't do a Leicester and dominate the ball and pick the opponents apart. But what they did is they managed the game well, and they used the ball well as well. So yeah, there were some really, really promising signs. And we were both kind of intrigued by his his transfer window, weren't we? When we're all screaming about centre backs and centre forwards now, that might be a debate that we could potentially have, but to bring in the three sort of attacking or the three central midfielders, and suddenly Blues go from what they were trying to do under Rooney and what Eustace had them doing, which was effective, to playing the way Mowbray did, then it showed, for me, that showed his expertise. Everyone else is screaming about two of the positions, and Mowbray brings in a couple of midfielders, and suddenly Blues are passing the ball much better and winning games.
Horses for courses, isn't it? I suppose he knew that was the biggest thing for me. I think because somebody pointed out to me, after about 3 weeks of Mowbray and saying that he's actually saying a lot of similar things to what Wayne Rooney had said previously. But what my response to that was, well, when Mowbray says it, I can believe it because he's done it for 20 years previously. He's had teams that have played this way in this league successfully. And I think we saw that, I mean, I don't know what Wayne Rooney would have done in the January transfer window, but, looking at it on the face of it to us novices who have absolutely no idea how to manage a football team, we'd have probably gone and signed a striker, we'd have gone and signed a defender to play the way that Blues wanted to at the time. But Mowbray, as you say, saw the problem was the midfield. Blues couldn't get through the thirds and signed two midfielders in Dazelle and Peck, who were very good at that in those early games under Mowbray. I know Dazelle, lost his way under Venus and then lost his place under Rout, and Peck was a constant, to be fair, throughout. He's very impressive in whatever system he played in. But it just shows that the experience that he had, and and that I think he would have been a success. There was only one moment where I doubted Blues under Mowbray, and that was after Sheffield Wednesday, because for all the shots and possession they had that night, Sheffield Wednesday did create the better chances and obviously won that game. And Blues were kind of edging towards the bottom three at that time, but they followed it up with 2 wins, and he was absolutely convinced that they wouldn't be in a relegation scrap. And you know what, if he was there for the entirety of that remainder of the season, I don't think they would have been in it come the end of the season.
No, certainly, what turned out to be his last 2 games, the 1-0 win over Blackburn, John Eustace's Blackburn, and the 2-1 win over Sunderland, formerly managed by Tony Mowbray. The Championship didn't want for ironic narratives, did it, in the last season? At that point, you really could see a team emerging. It wasn't a perfect team. I'm not going to pretend that Mowbray would have had this Blues 11 or this Blues squad anywhere near the playoffs, because I don't think he would have done. And we saw the shortcomings of the players unfold before our eyes. But I mean, he had everyone eating out the palm of his hand, didn't he? Not just fans, to an extent, media, to certainly the people around the club. And the players as well, and we saw that the players believed in what he was telling them, and those 2 games, a 1-0 win and a 2-1 win, they really had Blues moving in the right direction.
I think his charisma and his personality was probably the biggest thing that Blues missed in the immediate aftermath of when he stepped down. Him and Mark Venus are 2 very, very different characters, as we found out, and I do think Mowbray not being there, not so much in a coaching aspect, obviously that would have played a huge part as well, but his personality and the way he was around the place, his ability to pick himself up after a bad defeat or a bad result, that just wasn't there. And it was the training ground and whatever was a different place when Mowbray wasn't there. So yeah, that was a big thing for me as well.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that this is necessarily the place to get too stuck into Mark Venus, but you're absolutely right. The contrast in personalities, and it almost felt like, this is one blow too many for these players to deal with, didn't it? They were very on board with Eustace. I think the Rooney experience left them a little punch drunk, and then the saviour came along. Without being too grandiose about it, saviour with a small s came along, Tony Mowbray, and suddenly they believed again, and it was all right. And then there was another blow to the stomach, and it just felt from then as though it was, one setback too many.
Yeah, Brian, there's a lot of comments coming in. obviously now Blues are going to turn their attentions to finding a new manager. Gary Cook has promised a rigorous process. This will be the fourth manager, well, permanent manager of the Knighthead era in the space of 10, 11 months almost. Brian, just run down a couple of the early names and the frames. We've been sent through some odds, haven't we? And, we can't really read too much into that, but normally one of those names does tend to get the job.
Yeah, so the names that sort of at the top of the odds that we've been sent, Liam Rosenia, he's obviously out of work at the moment, having left Hull. Alex Neil, we've got a couple of things to say about that. Ian Evett, who is the Bolton manager, just missed out on promotion through the League One playoffs. Darren Ferguson, obviously the long-time, three-time, I think, manager, maybe even four-time manager of Peterborough. Gary Rowett's name is in there. Will Still, who was it? Reims that Will Still was at. I think he's just left them in League One. And then we've got some really interesting ones. Steve Bruce, Michael Beale. Ashley Cole's name is in there, as are the names of Scott Parker, Frank Lampard, and Neil Warnock. Now, those are just random names that a bookmaker has sent to us. Just key names. There'll probably be 500 applicants for this role, but what that list is just the key names. The ones that will maybe get a bit of traction. Thoughts? What are your thoughts on any of those I've thrown at you, Alex?
I think this is probably a podcast in itself, a little bit further down the line, but you obviously, Liam Rosenia is the one that jumps out, isn't it? I mean, he has just finished 7th in the Championship with a Hull City team that had some very good players in attacking areas, but I wouldn't have expected to finish in the top 6 at the start of the season, or finish in the top 7, which they did. I think he's going to probably have other suitors. Maybe Brighton, I think I saw the other day with him. They're obviously losing De Zerbi and needing a new coach, and he was there as a player. Very highly rated coach, plays the way that Knighthead do want to play in terms of ball possession and retention. So he's a very interesting name. Again, it's probably whether he'd be willing to drop down to League One. He has only had 2 seasons in the Championship. Before that, he was the Derby interim in League One. So I'm not sure he's out of Blues' reach, to be honest. Will Still's a very interesting one because he's kind of very famous for making his name through FM, Football Manager originally. So one for the kids. But yeah, he's obviously done really well at Rennes in France over the last couple of seasons. That's in League One, in the top flight. So again, is League One going to be beneath him? I've seen he's been heavily linked with the Sunderland job, hasn't he? So again, that's one to probably watch. Who else is there? Steve Bruce. I can't see him coming back, to be honest. Who else? Brian, remind me of some of the names.
Neil Warnock.
Neil Warnock's just gone to Torquay on an advisory role, but I presume he'll try and get back into management at some stage. I can't see it being at Blues. You mentioned Alex Neil. I think that's quite an interesting one because we have done him in this podcast before, haven't we? He was present at a few Blues games, a couple of Blues games, I think, towards the end of last season. I think when Venus was in charge on an interim basis. I saw Neil at one game. I think he was present at a couple of others. So he's been watching the team. I don't know that that'll stand in his work in his favour. I'm not sure, but he's obviously a manager who has got promoted from League One before, quite recently with Sunderland. Before jumping ship and going to Stoke. He's obviously done very well at the top end of the Championship during his Norwich City time. So he's probably a manager that comes with good pedigree, but also comes off the back of a difficult time at Stoke where it didn't work out. Yeah,
it didn't go well at Stoke. Absolutely. There's a massive recruitment drive, and it wasn't just on him. Stoke have really cleaned shop. In the last 6 months, Neil went, obviously replaced by Stephen Schumacher. Then their head of scouting went yesterday, or head of recruitment, I think, went yesterday. And then the director of football, or technical director, went back in February. So that really was viewed as a misstep last summer. So yeah, Alex Neil is on there, as you say, very experienced. Gary Rowett's also on that list. What were your thoughts about Rauer's 8 games, Alex? I mean, he won 3. Was it 8 and he won 3? Is that right? Or am I thinking of Mowbray?
Yes, he did win 3.
They both won 3, didn't they? 3
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very not dissimilar records actually.
Yeah.
I think Rao did quite well in those 8 games. To be honest, he gave Blues a platform. He obviously recognised quite early that the only way to really win games with this Blues team was to keep clean sheets because they weren't scoring an awful lot of goals. It's important to note that those 3 wins all came with clean sheets. Kept another clean sheet away at Rotherham, so that made it 4 clean sheets from his 8 games in charge. 11 points from 8. Gary Wright wasn't the reason that Blues got relegated. I'm not 100% certain that he will be their manager, or he will be one of the top candidates to be their manager in League One. Although I think it depends what style they want to go down, Brian, doesn't it? It comes back to that again because they almost kind of reverted to type when they brought manager Gary Wright back in March to effectively save the season, having given it the spiel before when Rooney came in about playing no fear football and playing an attacking style of play. It depends if they want to really pursue that in League One, and perhaps now with the reset of League One, they have got the opportunity to do what Ipswich did almost and build that style of play in League One. Then it can obviously translate into the Championship. Or do they get a manager in Gary Wright who might not play as brilliant football, but he's a guy who has consistently got results throughout his managerial career? That's a decision that they do need to make. I probably think they will go back to what they said in October and try and appoint a manager to play the style of football that they think can get them not only out of League One but out of the Championship as well.
Yeah, I agree. That is the blueprint, isn't it? They with us and in the open house that I think the first open house they had with fans, there was a lot of talk about this stat, wasn't there, that teams that dominate the ball have got an 80% chance of getting out of the league. Also, that's not the stat, but the point remains is that teams who have more of the ball tend to do better. I'm wondering if that's a bit of a false gold or fool's gold or a false idol or something like that. I always feel if you've got better players, then that enables you to dominate the ball, but that's not what we're here to discuss. I think that's the way they'll go. I think they'll go with someone with a pedigree in building possession-based teams.
I think if Rowett probably had almost an audition, didn't he, in those 8 games, and I think he's probably kept himself in the conversation. I think that's fair to say. But
I would say so, and it's a big difference between building a team to get out of League One and by playing with the ball, and one to stay in the Championship, fighting for every last point, isn't it? Just in terms of the spacing between the players and how far up the pitch your back line is, and the profile of midfielders and what your attacking patterns are. It's a very, very, very different job. And Rowett has, didn't have the opportunity to be expansive. Whether he's got the skill set to be expansive, then maybe who knows.
I actually think he played better football in those 8 games than I expected. I know he probably didn't have many other options because he didn't have Lucas Djukovic up front, did he, for a lot of those games where he could have just gone a little bit more direct. Blues had to play through the thirds to a striker in Jay Stansfield, who is not known for holding the ball up. But I actually think that he used those players quite well and worked out a way to get up the field. You could see the patterns of play in a lot of those games. The only disappointing matches for me were those big 2 away games against Rotherham and Huddersfield, where the selection of Ollie Burke still gets me. It does still get me. I know it gets a lot of Blues fans. And as one commenter has just pointed out, David Field, he did blot his copybook a little bit by picking Oliver Burke. I think if Rout had that moment again, he wouldn't do it. But yeah, I think Rout's probably in the conversation based on the 8 games that he finished the season with.
Yeah, indeed. One name that we didn't want to necessarily turn this podcast into a Who Next, because that is another podcast on its own. But Ashley Cole, we'll mention him as the final one. Obviously, he's at the club believe he's highly thought of at the club, isn't he? His main sort of experience prior to Blues was as Lee Carsley's assistant as the England under-21s. Which competition did they win? Was it Euros?
Euros last summer, yeah.
Yeah, it's last summer's Euros. Ashley Cole remains there. Is it a job for a first-time manager?
It's difficult, isn't it? I think he's got to launch his managerial career somewhere if that's the route he doesn't want to go. He does want to go down, and given his profile, 100+ England caps, however many Premier League titles with Chelsea, a Champions League, and what have you, League One's probably about the right level to launch a managerial career, isn't it? I think. Others have gone in higher. Frank Lampard went in higher at Derby. Steven Gerrard went in arguably higher at Rangers. So it's probably about the right level. However, Ashley Cole, whether he obviously wasn't making the big decisions at Blues last season, but he's attached to that relegation because ultimately he did come in October. He was part of the coaching staff throughout that period that got Blues relegated. So it's whether they've seen enough in him during that time to think he can be our manager moving forward. It'll be interesting to see if he stays at the club at all, really, I suppose, if the new manager comes in and wants to bring their own coaching staff in, which they should be given that chance if they want to, then whether Cole is part of that. Because as we know, he wasn't, part of the Wayne Rooney coaching staff per se, was he? He was more of a club appointment that was brought in. And that shows, given that he's outlasted all those guys who came in with Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, indeed. I suspect we've presented this a little bit like, we're trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel and Blues isn't an attractive job. Make no mistake about this. Blues is a very attractive job. And, if someone like Liam Rosenior, thinks that he's too good for Birmingham City, then let's just paint the picture of what a great gig this is. Because it is, isn't it? Yes, the relegation has been embarrassing. I use the word embarrassing rather than existential, as it would have been under the previous owners. But these owners mean this is a fantastic job, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you look at League One next season, Blues are going to have the biggest budget in that league. They're going to have the best players in that league, or should have the best players in that league. Obviously, that depends a lot on recruitment as well. It's going to be the chance for a manager potentially a young manager or an experienced manager to either relaunch or launch their career. Blues are going to be hopefully having a good time in League One next season. Winning games, supporters are going to be happy, attendances will grow with that as well. It's a big club and it's going to be a massive club in that league. When Blues get to the Championship, what is to say that they can't do in Ipswich Town, provided the lessons of last season have been learnt by all those in power at the club, then there is no reason why Blues can't go up, strengthen, and then compete again. I think it's a very attractive job. You look at all the things going on behind the scenes at the club. You look at the stadium and the improvements that have been made in the last 2 weeks since the season finished. You look at the prospect of a new stadium. If you are the manager coming in now, I mean, I know managers have a very, very short shelf life in football, but if Tom Wagner thinks this new stadium could be open in 5 years, there is a very, very small chance that you could be the manager that takes Birmingham City into that new stadium. So if you do very well, that is, if you're probably going to be in the Premier League and doing well in the Premier League at that point. But yeah, it's a very attractive job. A lot's going on at Blues, and good things are going to happen. There's obviously going to be a little bit of pain, or has been pain in the short term, but there's no reason why someone like Liam Rosenior, a young up-and-coming manager, or a few of the other names we've mentioned, shouldn't see this as an attractive job.
Really is getting in on the bottom rung of a ladder that's that hopefully leads all the way to the Premier League. Would be a fantastic opportunity and a great place to build a CV. Alex, the final thing I want to come on to, and we haven't discussed this yet, is the released retain list. Probably worth just mentioning here before we clock off. Obviously, John Ruddy and Lukas Djukovic are the two players that have been offered new contracts. Just run through the players that will be moving on for us, please. Yeah,
so Blues have also exercised their option to extend Keshi Anderson's contract by a further 12 months. And then that means Neil Etheridge, Mark Roberts, Ivan Sunjic, Gary Gardner and Scott Hogan are leaving the club. I think that's probably about where we were at when we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I think Gary Gardner's the only one we thought maybe they could offer him another year with the experience, and obviously affinity with the club in League One may work. But no great surprises really, given that four of those 5 players played real bit parts last season. The only one who was a regular in the Blues team was Ivan Sunjic, and we never expected him to drop down into League One. Lukas Djukovic, I think we both felt was worthy of another year, not just because of what he could offer as one of the striking department, because of what he can offer behind the scenes in the dressing room as well. We know he's an excellent character and has been for a number of years, and hopefully they can come to a conclusion on that means he stays. And John Ruddy, I think we were both kind of umming and ahhing about him, weren't we? Because yes, you want Blues to potentially reset their goalkeeping department and find a younger goalkeeper or 2 younger goalkeepers that can be the club's keepers for the next 2 or 3 years, potentially even longer. But we obviously have seen that John Ruddy is still very capable in the Championship, has still got excellent leadership qualities and has a lot to offer this Blues side, even if it is in League One. So I think we both said that we wouldn't be disappointed if he was offered an extension, and so it's proved. So I think the club have made quite sensible calls on the players they've decided to keep on.
Yeah, indeed. The theme with the Ruddy and Djukovic contract offers is leadership, isn't it? Absolutely retaining people who will enforce standards. And I know you could potentially say, "Oh, what happened to the standards towards the end of last season?" That might be an argument. But if Blues are on a rebuild, then I do think you want people around who know what the club's about and they know what it looks like to be, certainly in Ruddy's case, in a winning and professional and conscientious and environment. So yeah, no, as you say, we both sort of said maybe not Ruddy, but you can absolutely understand it, and that's assuming he signs it, of course. I think it's the right thing to do to offer it. Djukovic presumably will have other offers on the table as well. Love to see him stay and bring Blues back into the Championship. We're going to be a little bit romantic there. We've both got a lot of affection and time for Duke. Maybe not as a 46 game, 90-minute starter every week, but certainly as someone who can play his part, whether that's infrequent starts or frequently used off the bench. But yeah, certainly be nice for him to finish off his Blues career if that's the way it goes with a promotion. Should we wrap it up there, Alex?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I've just got one. We've got so many comments, so thank you all for that. Sorry we haven't got to them. It wasn't really that kind of podcast or broadcast today, but we do appreciate your interest. I'm just going to hand it over to Jamal, who I think sums up what we all feel about today's news. A good man, a moral man, get well soon, Tony. That just about says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, agreed. Very best wishes to Tony and his family as well.
Yeah, indeed. So it's a thank you for your interest, and it's a keep right on from both of us here.